Splatoon 3, sadly, is a ways off, being announced coming out in 2022. And this announcement came as a surprise to many because most people just kind of assumed that, there was going to be one Splatoon per console lifecycle, so the inevitable Splatoon 3 would likely be on a console to come, but instead, we've happily been wrong. Splatoon 3 is coming out next year, and we all could not be more excited. As we talked about in the other day's trailer analysis when we went over all the new footage from the trailer, I did mention a few things up top, just talking about expectations of where this project stands and when we'll be seeing it coming out. If you haven't seen that video, I definitely recommend you checking out. We go over all the secrets and hidden details in the Splatoon 3 trailer. But what's important here today is why Splatoon 3 so far off? Why is it a 2022 game? Why isn't it coming out this year? What makes Splatoon 3 so special that it's going to just take so long to come out? So that's what we're going to go through today. Kind of break things down, what makes most sense for the production cycle of this game, and when we can start to expect to see new information about the game. But before we get started, if you are new here, perhaps consider subscribing. Not only do we have a bunch of Splatoon 2 videos from forever ago, but of course we plan to do tons with Splatoon 3 in the next year going forward when new trailers and screenshots and other stuff get released. So if you want to come along for the journey, and if you like Splatoon, subscribe if you want. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Anyways, thanks guys so much for listening to all that. Without further ado, let's get started. I think the best place to start when kind of talking about this whole idea of a Splatoon 3 is kind of go off what we saw before with not only Splatoon 2, but Splatoon 1 as well. Like keeping those both in context will kind of help us give a good gauge of what we can expect as far as content of what's going to launch with this game, what kind of new features are going to come with it, when will it release, and why it's going to take so long to come out. There's a lot to unpack here, but let's first start with Splatoon 1 going into Splatoon 2. Splatoon 1 was a really successful title. A lot of people got into this brand new IP. It was such an interesting gameplay mechanic and is easily one of the best games on the Wii U. So then, when it came to making a sequel for this game, coming here to Switch, the important thing to think about is the scope of the audience that Splatoon 2 would be catering to would be significantly larger than the Wii U. While sure, yes, the Splatoon on the Wii U was one of the most successful titles there, but at the end of the day, not many people owned a Wii U. And as far as fans like myself, and maybe some of you as well that played like the entire series so far, we are in the minority for playing both Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2. Most people have played just Splatoon 2 because most people just didn't own a Wii U. And so if you think about it like that, from that perspective, that's kind of the mentality they had going from development of Splatoon 1 into Splatoon 2. That's one of the major reasons why a lot of the content of the base game of Splatoon 2 was just stuff that they brought over from 1. All of it was new to the majority of the audience of this game. Launching with very few brand new maps didn't really matter because they could just bring a lot of the old maps from Splatoon 1 because not many people actually played those. Launching with only 2 brand new weapon types seemed like a small amount, but again, when the majority of the audience of people playing Splatoon 2 perhaps have never played Splatoon before, every single weapon is going to be new to them. And so I think it's to that effect why Splatoon 2, for me anyways, was a little bit of a weird experience where I wasn't really impressed by playing Turf War again or the ranked modes and stuff because I'd already played hundreds upon hundreds of hours of essentially what was exactly the same that they had here in 2 in 1 previously. What interested me more personally was the new content, the stuff that they introduced brand new with 2. That being, at least when it launched, just the Salmon Run mode. And still today, that's like my favorite mode in Splatoon 2, because that was like the new feature that came to the game. So that's why you can see my player level is still super low compared to the amount of hours I have in this game, because really all I ever played in this game was Salmon Run and Private Battles. Because that's just what appealed to me more. Sure, as time progressed, they added new maps, they added new weapons, and that's just kind of how Splatoon is formatted, and we could definitely expect something similar in Splatoon 3. So that's kind of covering the jump from the sequel, going from Splatoon 1 to Splatoon 2, but here's the thing about going from 2 to 3, because they can't do the same thing they did with 1 to 2. Like we said, in the case of 1 to 2, not many people played the first game, so they could reuse a ton of the content and just label it as brand new content anyways. The thing with Splatoon 3 is, that's just not going to be possible. The goal of Splatoon 3 is to give people a reason who own Splatoon 2 to switch over. There needs to be enough new content and new features included in this new Splatoon 3 package, exclusive things that you can never experience in Splatoon 2 to give people, consumers, a reason to actually switch over, to promote, to get 3 instead of 2. 3 were to launch with a ton of returning maps from 2, a bunch of the same old weapons just with a handful of new ones. Essentially what I mean is if they did something similar from going from Splatoon 1 to Splatoon 2, where there was only a handful of couple of new things and called it a sequel, they simply can't do that with Splatoon 3. Because while the hardcore fans like myself, and I'm sure many of you are getting Splatoon 3 no matter what, but there's a larger audience of the Splatoon fandom that would perhaps need more convincing to validate a purchase of a second Splatoon game on a console you already own. What's going to give these players the reason to be like, okay, you know what? I can't play Splatoon 2 anymore because there is so much new content here in 3 that it makes 2 just redundant. What is Splatoon 3 going to offer that is completely unique that Splatoon 2 can no longer offer to people to give gamers a reason to have to promote forward, to have to get the newest title? I think that's the biggest reason why we're kind of in the position we are here, with Splatoon 3's release date so far out, why the footage looks so early on, why we don't see too much stuff, but all the stuff we do see is generally brand new assets. Splatoon 3 needs to offer a ton of brand new, unique, exclusive content to its game, so then people switch over from playing 2 to actually go and play 3. Like I said, if 3 were to launch in a similar fashion to what 2 did, there wouldn't be as nearly much of a reason to promote over to 3. And so with all this knowledge of all of what I just barely talked about, I think it's very likely to expect that the reason that Splatoon 3 is so far out is because there's going to be a lot of new content put into this game. From what we can already see with the first new map that's been released, Splatoon 3 is taking on this entirely new aesthetic. You know, out in the Splatlands, in the Badlands, out in the desert, and I'm sure we'll jump around the different maps and stuff like that. But to kind of fit the aesthetic and the theming of this game, in order to do that, they're going to have to make a ton of new maps. But also any previous maps, if they're going to come back, need to kind of drastically change in order to fit this new aesthetic. If they just bring in Moray Towers, or Urchin Underpass, or any other classic Splatoon stage, it would feel really out of place. If we're in this world of chaos, where it's like post-apocalyptic, and all of a sudden you just kind of just go back to society as it used to be in the previous games, it would feel just a tad jarring. So one prediction I kind of have is, I'm sure we'll see returning maps at some point, whether launching with the base game, or coming in later updates as well. But I could see them actually like revamping the maps, maybe changing up some of the layout a little bit, moving some of the platforms, maybe some of the pathways are broken, so there's like new ways to move about the map, taking on a new aesthetic, of course, maybe just dumping sand in it, just filling it all with sand, rusted tossed over cars, and other post-apocalyptic stuff that would like fit with the theming of Splatoon 3. But beyond maps, I think they also really need to focus on a lot of new weapon types. Rather than launching with just 2 new weapons like Splatoon 2 did and later releasing brand new ones down the road, this is the Splatoon series' unique opportunity to introduce a ton of brand new different weapon types that totally mix up how the game is played. We've already seen the announcement of a bunch of like returning weapons, the classics coming back, the blasters, the splatter shot, but as you'll notice, they're getting a brand new coat of paint compared to Splatoon 1 and 2, where you look at the splatter shot, it looks literally exactly the same. The blaster, exactly the same. Everything stayed generally the same. So from what we've already seen with how these new weapons have been redesigned, I think that's an idea we can take going forward for what we can expect for the entirety of this game. The scope of Splatoon 3 is to remix everything. While there'll be returning weapons, returning features, returning maps, returning modes, the goal of Splatoon 3 is to remix it all, change up the formula, mix it up, make the game feel like it plays differently than any previous game in the series. I talked about it in the trailer analysis, but like the 2 new moves when you're in squid form, as well as no longer having a spawn platform and you're not going to select where you will spawn on the map, will drastically impact how the multiplayer gameplay is going to change when it comes to like turf war and such. So I think going forward, what we can kind of expect for other new modes and other stuff to come down the road is we'll see some more of these more unique changes that'll really refresh the gameplay and make it feel, well, for lack of a better word, fresh and new again. We can see stuff similar to like minor adjustments, like we saw how tower control changed a little bit from going from 1 to 2, but I could see them introducing new mechanics on top of already the previous existing modes to really just change up the formula of how these games are played. That's one thing I really hope for when it comes to Splatoon 3. I really hope we can see some brand new modes, different ways to play in this game. Of course, there are the classics, and those will always stand tried and true. But it is nice to have different options and different ways to play, to have these new experiences in this game. That's one of the most important things that comes to making a sequel, especially a sequel to a multiplayer game that essentially could live on forever as long as the servers are up. And even more than that, this game exists on the same platform as its predecessor. So effectively, Splatoon 3 is competing with Splatoon 2. It's competing with itself. So it truly needs to set itself apart from the series before, introduce tons of new mechanics, new modes, new weapons, new maps, just so much new content that makes this game feel totally different than anything Splatoon 2 could ever offer. Like I said up at the top, while I still do love Splatoon 2 and had a great time with it, I didn't nearly play it as much on my own because I had already really gotten my experience out of playing this game single player. I had played so much Splatoon 1, Turf War, ranked modes, and so then when it came to Splatoon 2, I was more interested in the new content, the new mechanics introduced. That's why I spent more time playing Salmon Run on my own time. And besides that, I would really only play private battles with you guys on stream, off stream, or whatever. So it's really exciting to know and see that there's going to be a lot of new content coming here in Splatoon 3. But with knowing all this, it makes so much more sense now why this game's going to be releasing in 2022 rather than later this year. And I think it's worth expecting that it's not going to be right away. It's not going to be the January 1st, 2022 they're going to release it. No, I feel it's going to be well into the year. If I had to make an accurate prediction, I feel like Splatoon's just a summer game. The first Splatoon game released at the end of May, so basically right at the dawn of summer, and Splatoon 2 came out in July in the middle of the summer. Not that it has to follow the same release schedule, but it just does feel like a summer game, a big multiplayer game that a bunch of people can play together. And when kids are out of school, it's a great way to like interact with friends and get everyone excited that way. So I think depending on how things go and how we see with later trailers throughout the rest of this year, we'll kind of get a better idea and I'm sure a more accurate release date of when this game will come out. But if I had to make a guess right off the bat, considering the footage we've seen so far, I think it's more likely it'll probably come out towards the later half of the summer. Like I could see late July, maybe early August, or something around there. So with that all said, we have a lot of time in between now and the release date of Splatoon 3. There's a lot more chances for them to show off this game, show off new trailers, screenshots, smaller updates of just telling how the development process is going. I couldn't be more excited, and if you want to come along with me in our Splatoon 3 journey here on the channel, consider subscribing. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big awesome like. As a reminder, we do stream every weekend at 10 a.m. Eastern right here on YouTube Live. That's both Saturdays and Sundays. We're actually starting a new series doing some Splatoon stuff. We're working on the Octo expansion. We're going to revisit the Splatoon 2 campaign, and we might even go back to play Splatoon 1 just to kind of get like the full story life cycle of Splatoon going in, getting hype, and going into inevitable Splatoon 3. Be sure to follow me over on my socials as well as join our community Discord. The link to that is in the description below. It's a great place to find people to squad up with in Splatoon, play private lobbies and stuff. It's a lot of fun over there and I highly encourage you to check it all out. Thanks again guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!